Hi, everybody. So this is going to be really fun. We are here in honor of Halloween. We're going to be talking about the Disney, I guess, film. I don't want to say Disney classic. It's not quite on there, but the Disney film from 1980, The Watcher in the Woods. And we're going to be comparing it to the recent TV movie version that just came out last week. So we're going to be comparing the two, talking about both of them and how they stand up. And my friend AJ is here with me to do this.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, and so this will be a lot of fun. Is this original? Is it one that you grew up with, or just watched more recently?
It's actually one I just found out about a couple years ago, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I was writing for a website I actually don't write for anymore, but it was about underrated Disney movies, and I was going to write about Something Wicked This Way Comes, Disney's other horror movie.
Yeah, I love that movie. I think that one is much better than this one, but yeah, they're both.
Yes, I agree. But as I was researching for that movie, I found out about this Watcher in the Woods, and I'm like, what is that? And then I went to go look that up, and I found out it has a long, fascinating backstory about the making of the film and stuff like that. And it kind of became my mission to see it after that.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that, about the backstory, that how it kind of came? Because it does seem like a really odd fit for Disney, but you kind of have to understand sort of the late 70s, 80s, kind of where Disney was at and some of the risks they were taking at that time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this was during the time like when Ron Miller was CEO of Walt Disney Pictures, and a lot of Disney fans who are like animation fans kind of criticize Ron Miller for not really handling animation all that well. And we can be honest and say that he really didn't. but he wasn't really trained in animation. Walt kind of trained him to be more of a live action movie producer. And so that's where a lot of his attention was focused. And you can really see that during this whole period, like we were talking about. And
right.
And I was actually just watching an interview with Ron Miller earlier today, kind of as a preface to all the Watcher in the Woods stuff from 1978. And somebody asked, so would Disney ever consider making something that was a little bit more intense, something like Jaws or something like that? And Ron Miller said, oh, I would have loved to have made Jaws, but we can't do it. We have an image to maintain, basically. But he always wanted to do something like that. He always wanted to take risks in live action. And then somebody brought him the book, The Watcher in the Woods, and said, hey, this could be what you're looking for. This could be our Exorcist, And Ron Miller read it, and he liked the book a lot. And so they put it in production and hired John Huff to direct it, who had directed a really famous horror movie in 1973, The Legend of Hell House.
Never heard of that.
So, yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's really good. And then, of course, he also directed Escape to Witch Mountain. And so...
Yeah, because right around this time, they had a number of sort of darker themed films. You had the Black Hole. You had... A Return to Oz, which I think was a little bit later, but you had Watcher in the Woods, Something Wicked This Way Comes. So it was this interesting sort of experiment. You could even say the Black Cauldron in a way, in I guess 85, I want to say. But that it was this interesting sort of period where they were kind of experimenting with these sort of darker themes and sort of horror elements and stuff like that. And so this is one that I think you could confidently say this is maybe one of the more cult classic of the Disney live action films. It's one of those films that I think a lot of people, it's probably one of their first introductions to horror movies. And I mean, I'm no like expert on the genre, but I do think it's good to have these films that aren't too, graphic or gory or whatever, and that you can introduce your kids, whether it's the original Universal monster movies or, whatever it might be, something that's tame enough, but they can get a feel for this is how this genre kind of works, and here's how some tropes are for this genre, and here's the way the music is for this genre and whatever, and kind of give them a feel for it without scaring them too much. And so, this is This is one. I have reviewed this on my channel if people are curious. I'm just ending tomorrow. Tomorrow will be my last of my Disney Scares month, and I've done it 2 years in a row. So I did Watcher in the Woods last year. And so I'll put a link down in the description section if people want to check out that review. And I also reviewed the new version over on my blog. So I'll also put a link on that. But yeah, it's just an interesting experimental period. And I do think that Walt would have loved that because he was all about experimenting and moving forward and trying new things.
Definitely. This is actually I don't know if I would say it's my favorite period of Disney live action, because the movie's qualities are kind of hit and miss just overall. But I just love that idea of just trying new things, And yeah.
Definitely. So, okay, well, so it finally got released. It did have a pretty long production timetable, I think. And it's a pretty simple premise, like setup, let's say, that you have with these Americans are in England, and you have a couple with their 2 daughters, Jan and Ellie, and they are moving into this house that has this woman who is the owner of the house that lives in the guest house now, named Mrs. Islewood. And there is these sort of spooky woods next door to the house, and they start to kind of call out to them, and there's just this spooky ambiance around the woods in particular, but the whole house in general is kind of like a haunted house type environment. And so what I think they do really good in this version is that creating a sense of atmosphere and tension that's really well done. I think the cinematography, and I think what they do, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about the next one, but I think that they make interesting choices that make you think throughout the movie that's not obvious. Like, for instance, when Jan, the oldest girl, when she looks into the mirror and out the window, all of a sudden the mirror will crack and you'll get a triangle. And in the new version, we'll talk about it more, but in the new version, it's a cross, which I think is less interesting. Like a triangle, what does a triangle mean? A triangle, what? That's kind of confusing. It's kind of puzzling, and so it leads you to kind of draws you in, I think, as opposed to a cross. Everyone knows what a cross means, and it's less interesting. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with what you're saying about the atmosphere too, because that's one thing I noticed. And like we said, we'll talk about that more when we compare the two.
Yeah.
Just how each of them handle it. But I just kind of like the whole look of the older film overall. The original. It just felt more like a movie, I guess. And I'll explain more about what that means when we talk about the remake too.
Yeah, the cinematography is strong, and it just draws you in.
Yeah, and just like the production value, like the house looks more like a haunted house that you would see in another movie. And I love the way the forest looks, how the trees, like all the trees are all gnarled and weird looking, kind of like that tree in Poltergeist almost.
Yeah.
And there's like one of those in the remake, but it's not really like a feeling that like pervades the whole movie the way it does in the original.
Well, and they do these long like tracking shots in this film, but it just sort of draws you in. You almost feel like you are sort of a ghost going through the house or going along the driveway. And so I think that's the biggest strength of this movie is the atmosphere, the cinematography, production design, like you're saying. And I think that the other biggest strength is Bette Davis in here. She's so good. She's probably better than this movie deserves.
Yeah.
Mrs. Olive. Just her eyes alone there's something creepy about her. There's something weird about her. You don't trust her. You don't know what's going on. And I don't know. What did you think of her in this?
I thought she was really good. Like the acting in the original film overall is probably the film's biggest
Yeah.
problem. It's probably why it's not a classic today.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But she
Yeah,
is probably the best. She probably gives the best performance in the movie. Like you
definitely.
said, because there's so much of a mystery about her. It's like she's not the kindly old grandmother that you see in so many other movies. It's like throughout the whole movie, you kind of wondered, so whose side is she on? Is she?
Hmm.
It's like who is she trying to help here? Is she helping the watcher, or is she helping the kids, or is she just in it, or is she just playing both sides for her own gain?
Yeah, is
You
she
never
the
know what her
murderer?
motives are.
Did she kill her daughter? Like there's a feeling of like you don't know how to feel about her.
Yeah,
Is she going to kill Jan? Like what's going to happen? And so yeah, I think those are the two biggest strengths of the film. So basically we should say that there are definitely going to be spoilers in here. Forget to say that
yeah,
sometimes. And it starts out again making you ask questions, which I think is a strength of like little things like the fact that Ellie gets a dog and she names it Narek, which is like a very weird name. And then she starts spelling it out like on the window and on different things. And Narek is an anagram for Karen. And she does it just at all these sort of strange times. And so, like, why is she doing it? Because Karen is the name of the Mrs. Atwood's daughter that's gone missing. And so that's like, especially I think naming the dog is especially creepy. And you're like, why is she doing this? What's going on?
yeah. When I saw that whole window thing, where because she writes the name Karen in the window, but it's backwards. That's where they get Narek
Yeah.
from. And the whole time I was watching that, I was thinking the movie The Shining hadn't been released yet, but somebody has definitely read the book who wrote this script, because that whole time I was thinking of Red Rum, and murder. It's like,
Yeah.
that seems a little bit too much like The Shining to be a coincidence.
Yeah,
But
I guess I can
anyway,
see that. Yeah.
it's like, but it's like that whole thing. This is a whole plot device throughout the whole movie. That there's that whole thing where the watcher is using Ellie through the whole movie, and that always gives me the chills. Like whenever
Yeah.
a little kid is like directly involved,
Yeah, and especially like because when she names the puppy Narek, they haven't even started their investigation. They haven't really gotten any information. They don't even know. And so it like feels especially sort of like, why did she pick that name? And so I don't know, it's I think very effective. And then when she wakes up at night, in the night screaming about Narek and uh and it just adds to sort of the effectiveness of it all because you'd seen these sort of weird things you didn't understand before, and it just kind of builds. And so Jan and her boyfriend, I guess, named Mike, that they start researching all of this, and there's all these scary things happening, and she talks to different characters in the town, and there's this hermit guy named Tom Cooley who was there at the disappearance, and basically what it comes down to is there's this chapel in the woods, and it turns out that Karen and her friends were dabbling in some not so good stuff with the occult and everything, and they were having this seance, and it was on the night of a lunar eclipse. And basically there's like the watcher is basically kind of like an alien who like takes during this moment of this lunar eclipse, he basically takes over Karen, and she's in this sort of like in between space of life, and I don't know how to explain it. How do you explain that?
it's like almost like she's in another dimension.
Yeah.
Almost like, I guess that's the way I would describe it, because she's definitely not dead. She's not on another planet, I don't think. But I could be wrong about that. I
Yeah.
think it's like an interdimensional thing.
Yeah, it's like a I don't know, like a time warp, I guess you might call it that.
Yeah.
And there's this like circle of friendship, and so there's something really like kind of creepy about the uh, this seance and this what I like, we'll talk about a comparison to the new one. What I like is that like it's not just a monster movie about an alien, it's actually about these people that like made a choice to participate in this ceremony, and then like it became creepy, and it became, and they ended up having this happen. So that makes it more interesting, I think, than somebody who just like attacked, rather than, this was their choice to participate to me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What's Oh, sorry, go
What do
ahead.
you think about that? Do you think it's a little too silly, or do you like that idea of the seance and the clips and all of that?
I don't think it's silly. I kind of like that you literally don't know what the Watcher is until the very, very end.
Yeah.
Like literally, they don't explain it until then, and that's kind of what something that's neat about the whole movie overall. They don't really force feed a lot of stuff to you. They let you work things out for yourself. Like if you're paying attention, you can figure out what's happening before the characters do.
Mm-hmm.
Just from things that people say and stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I think it's unique. Like you said, I think it's not like a typical alien monster movie because they don't really exploit the alien part of it. Like
Right.
you don't really see, well, in the finished version, because there are two other alternate endings. In the official theatrical ending, you never even see the Watcher, really. You hear it talk through Ellie, but that's all, that's the only time the Watcher actually talks, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's also the alternate endings, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually, or at some point. But yeah, I don't think it's like a cheap like monster movie move because, like
Yeah.
I said, they don't really exploit it. You know?
Yeah, and they also aren't too heavy-handed in like the religious symbolism, or obviously there's a certain degree of it in that this is in a chapel, and they're dealing with seance and evil spirits and stuff like that, but it's not too heavy-handed. Like it's still, I think, family appropriate basically for this film.
Yeah,
And it's definitely scary, but I don't think it crosses any, for me, it doesn't cross any rules in that regard.
I think it's interesting the choice to make it an alien instead of like a ghost, especially considering how they were doing a seance of all things when the
Mm-hmm.
alien shows up. It's like, that's kind of the opposite of what I would expect to come out of a seance.
Yeah.
But I guess it's part of it being family appropriate, not getting too much into like the occult and stuff like that.
Right.
But
Yeah. And I think it works. It's just a little different. It's a little, like I said, I feel like this movie makes interesting choices. And, it does things in sort of interesting ways that you don't see all the time. Like, again, to use the mirror example, I don't always see like triangles randomly appearing, or like there's like this strange blue light that draws her into that the Watcher uses to draw Jan in, and she almost drowns. And that scene I think is really effective and really scary. And you don't know, like, is Mrs. Alwood, is she drowning her? Like, is she making it worse, or is she helping her, or what's going on? But I don't know. I just feel like it I am no horror expert, but I do feel like this makes interesting choices, and is pretty well made for what it is.
yeah, it is.
Now,
And
let's talk about some of those downsides. And you already mentioned it. So the acting is the biggest problem in this movie, particularly Jan, and it's Lynn Holly Johnson. This is not good.
no,
It's
I
not
guess
good.
I guess she has an
And
excuse because she wasn't really an actress. That wasn't what she was famous for.
yeah,
She was
she's a
like a famous
model.
figure skater.
Oh, okay.
So, and her big movie before this had been Ice Castles, where she played a blind figure skater. And so
Oh, okay.
they figured, oh, she's popular. Let's put her in here. And it did not work out in this
No.
particular case. Her line
No.
readings are just so weird, like the way she says certain things.
Yeah, it's really pretty bad. And then they have Kyle Richards from, we now know her from, some people know her from The Real Housewives. She's on one of those shows as an adult. But anyway, as a little Ellie, she's not the greatest child actor I've ever seen. She's not as bad as Jan, but not great.
No, she's not. Like you said, she's not bad, but she's not good either. She's just kind of there to deliver her lines. She doesn't really put any emotion to hardly anything.
Yeah.
Whereas Lynn Holly Johnson seems to put too much emotion to everything. Like she's
Yeah,
either
and
super happy or she's like screaming.
yeah. And she's just flat. It just comes off as very, very flat, like she's reading a cue card is how it
Yeah.
feels. And she might have been, I don't know, some of the times. I mean, pretty much all the performances are that way. It's very flat, very except for Betty Davis. She's the only one. That's why I'm saying she's, I think, too good for this movie.
Which is, but it's sad because the two actors who play the parents, their parents are actually good actors if you see them in other stuff. David
Mm-hmm.
McCallum, who's most famous, I think, for being on the Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV show. He
Mm.
was one of the secret agents on there. And then
Okay.
Carol Baker, who was like the grandma of the little kid on Kindergarten Cop, the one with the gun at the end. That's what I know her best from. But they're
That's
actually really
funny.
good when you see them in other stuff, but this movie doesn't give them anything to do. Like David
No.
McCallum is literally like in 3 scenes, I think. And then, yeah.
Yeah, their job is to just be like, Jan, why are you causing all this trouble? You know, kind of thing. Like, why
And
are
we'll
you
get more into
breaking this
that in the
mirror?
I'm sure we'll get more into that in the remake because it's even more pronounced there. Jan, why are you doing this? They said that about 50,000 times over the course of the remake.
Yeah. So I don't know what score from 1 to 10 would you give the original Watcher in the Woods? What do you think is fair?
Maybe. I guess. I guess maybe a 5. That sounds kind of harsh. Maybe a 5.5.
Uh-huh.
Maybe because the story overall is a solid story,
Yeah. The acting
and
is rough. It's really hard to get past.
and and it is, and the production value is good, even if it is a little bit dated. You can tell it was a movie that was made in the late 70s, even though it
Mm-hmm.
was released in 1980. You can tell,
Yeah.
but still, the acting, like you said, is really hard to get around, and
Yeah, I'd
that
probably
really
give it a
hurts it.
6. I think it's watchable, and you can have a good time watching it. But I really think anybody who pretends this is some kind of masterpiece needs to check their nostalgia glasses really
Yeah,
hard, because it's not. And that's why I was actually really excited for the remake, because even though it's made for TV, I think those are becoming better, and I thought that this is the kind of movie you should remake, one that has potential, but is very flawed. You know, that's a perfect movie to remake. And so let's talk about that for a little bit. We have this new remake that came. It's actually directed by Melissa Joan Hart from Sabrina the Teenage Witch fame,
best
and
best known to
I
me as Clarissa from Clarissa Explains It All.
right. And I have to say, I thought this was, it has problems, and we'll talk about it. And I feel like they made it kind of generic, but I think she did a pretty good job. Like, I don't think it's awful. I think that in some ways it definitely improved upon the original. We'll talk about that. And I thought it was okay. I guess in
Yeah,
the end.
yeah, I would agree with that. Like, it's not a badly made movie, you know. She's not
Yeah.
the most stylish filmmaker in the world, Melissa Joan Hart.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell they had a TV budget just
Right.
from some of the choices they made, but it's not bad looking. And I think
Yeah.
it's, yeah,
They didn't have some of that interesting cinematography that the original had, or but it was fine as far as the production values, and the house they got was really good, and the woods looked good. They did a good job, I think, creating some of the atmosphere. It isn't quite, I think it's not quite as effective as the original as far as atmosphere, but yeah, it's really interesting. So in this version, you have, I think the biggest strength is the cast is, I think, uniformly better than the 1980
Yeah.
version. I'm not saying they're like the greatest actors in the world, but I think pretty much every single one is better. I think that Angelica Houston is probably as close as you could get to Bette Davis now. And so she's good. I have a feeling, though, with Angelica Houston, they only had her for a couple days because she's not in the movie very much, and it's only in particular scenes. So that I just have I'm just guessing that they only had her for a very limited time period, because she's only on like particular sets, particular parts, and she's not in it that much. But I don't know. What do you think about the casting?
I think it's good overall. Like, I think it's better than the original, like you said. I think my main problems with the acting, actually, I'm not going to say it's a problem with the acting, because I think there's some like really weird quirks that the script has.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, that kind of made the acting seem like it wasn't too good, but I don't think it was the actor's fault. I think it was just the lines they were given that were kind of weird sometimes. But I still think Angelica Houston is probably the best actor in the movie.
Agreed.
You know, the same, carrying on the tradition from the original. Have the Hollywood veteran be the best in the movie.
Yeah.
But
I thought that Tallulah Evans was a big step up for Jan. I mean, she's much better.
Yeah, she is. She actually talks like a human being talks.
And she looks so much like Britt Robertson, from Tomorrowland.
Yeah.
I thought she looked so much like her. She could have been her doppelganger. But I thought she was much better, and I also thought that the girl, her name's Dixie Eggerichs, was much better as Ellie. And I thought that the guy, they named him Mark for some reason. I don't know why you would change Mike to Mark, but they did. And I thought he was much better. Like, I really thought that pretty much, except for, I think that Bette Davis and Angelica Houston are the same, about the same level of acting, but the rest of them I pretty much thought were all better than the original.
Yeah,
I really did. And so that's the biggest strength I think this has over the original film. But let's talk about some of the changes. I feel like what hurt this movie to me is that I feel like they took what were interesting choices in the original film, like I mentioned about the cross, and did a more generic choice. And I feel like there was no reason. I don't see why this particular thing was more. I just don't understand why they did what they did, because it doesn't seem like it was a cost-saving measure or more modern, or I don't understand. Like, as I was saying about the cross, so the reason why they have a cross instead of a triangle is because they changed the narrative so that instead of it being this alien, the Watcher isn't an alien. Instead, he is this like priest that was treating, or doctor, actually it's a doctor, anyway, that's treating these people for the plague. And he goes over to this other town and he gets the plague, and then the people in the town kill him, and he never has his, like, because they don't want to get the plague. So they're like scared. And so he never gets his like last rites or his like due respect or whatever. And so he's in this sort of limbo with the plague. And so it's basically like what they do is, instead of it being this sort of weird, interesting, with the seance and the eclipse and these teenagers choosing to participate in the ceremony and all this stuff you have in the original, it's basically just a monster movie here. You have this creature, this Watcher in the woods that's like preying on young women. And he's just upset because they didn't do his funeral. They didn't do his whatever. And I just don't understand why you would make that choice. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, it is weird. It's like I was actually like because there's a couple of panels with like Melissa Joan Hart and some of the crew on there.
Uh-huh.
On there on YouTube. This is
Yeah.
what I mean by there. And and Melissa Joan Hart was talking about how she felt like some of the story elements in the original were confusing. And she talked about like she thought that the end was really confusing. And I was like, I don't really understand what you mean because I feel like the new plot line is a little bit more confusing than the original.
Yeah. Well, and there is some ambivalence in the original as far as what alien is this and where has Karen actually been and stuff like that. But I like that. That makes it interesting. That makes you think about it. That makes you, like a monster movie you don't have to think about it. There's no like question, like you watch a Godzilla movie, it's not like you're thinking about like these deeper themes or it's just a monster movie, and that can be fun, and I did have some degree of fun with this, but I don't know, I just feel like I guess they didn't like that ambivalence, is from what you're saying.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, that's basically what they said. And I think they mostly thought that that adding the sci-fi element was really weird. I don't think they liked that mash of like horror and science fiction,
Yeah.
And so I think that's why they decided to make it just a straight ghost story.
Well, I kind of wondered if they were trying to kind of make it a little bit of a Stranger Things vibe, which I hope everybody's having fun watching. Season 2 just started this weekend, but they have this whole section where there's this tree that takes you to this other world where the Watcher is, and where Karen is, where Karen has been hanging out, and I that's very similar to like the other world and Stranger Things and stuff, and it's like, I don't think that anybody was really like, what world? What does it look like where Karen's at? Like you just had the blue light. That was enough. Like I, I, I don't know. I think that they were maybe trying to kind of explain things a little bit too much. And you did get these scenes with these exposition dumps, and you have them in the original, but they have more here because, yeah, I guess they really didn't like that ambivalence of
Yeah,
the sort of the sci-fi, which I like. I thought that was fun. That made it. I like a movie that you can like talk about and be like, oh, what were they trying to say there? And to me, that elevated what was a flawed film in the original. That it made these interesting choices,
yeah.
you know.
It's like,
And so I don't know. That's very interesting. And I don't know. I just felt like, boy, I've just seen this kind of movie, and it's not like I've seen that many horror movies, but I've seen this kind of movie many times, and even with things like the Narek elements in the movie. So they, instead of it being just this weird random thing that Ellie names the dog Narek, because they haven't started investigating, they haven't started asking questions. In here, she doesn't even name the dog Narek, and she just randomly, while Jan is asking questions and knows all of this stuff, she writes the name on the window, and it's just not as like, it doesn't draw you in. The mystery doesn't draw you in as much because we already know what that means, because we've already heard all of this exposition about Karen and who Karen was and blah blah blah. And so like her doing it's just not as weird, it's not as creepy, it doesn't sort of draw you in as much as they do in the original film. And I think that they do the actual Narek like screaming in the middle of the night scene pretty well, but I don't know, I just feel like it was a missed opportunity to kind of add more mystery.
yeah, definitely. It's like, I don't know. And it doesn't even, I don't know. What am I trying to say? I guess the thing that makes it interesting about the movie is that you don't really know what's happening. You're pretty much, I don't want to say you're in the dark totally for most of the original movie, but they don't explain things to you very much over the course of the movie. They kind of leave it to you to figure out what's going
Yeah,
on a
and that
lot of
makes
the
it
time.
good.
Yeah. And it's like, it's also like many people who make horror films say that like what you don't see is always more scary or more interesting than anything that a filmmaker could possibly make, with like financial limitations and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's like they didn't believe that when they were making the remake. It's like, nah, people don't want to use their imaginations. Just show them everything.
Yeah,
And people don't want
agreed.
to think when they're watching something. So let's just explain it to them entirely.
Like, I think her randomly naming the dog Narek is more scary than her waking up in the middle of the night screaming Narek. Like, that to me is more sort of chilling of like, why did she name this dog this weird name? Like, out of like does this have control over it? Like, it's just easier to believe that someone could have a nightmare where they wake up screaming than like just something totally random. To me is more scary. And so I don't know, I thought they did this scene with the drowning pretty well. I thought it was filmed well. I thought that it uh, was it really felt like she was drowning. I thought they did a good job, and you really felt like she was drowning her. Like, there wasn't as much sort of I don't know. I thought that scene was pretty well done and pretty similar to the original.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
true.
yeah. And so yeah, all those elements, but then the ending is less satisfying because it's a monster movie and they're just fighting this monster, basically, is what it comes down to. And it didn't feel like, what did you think about this reveal of the bells?
Um, I don't know. It was like they almost tried to manufacture some kind of mystery at the end because they talked about like, what is this peeling you're talking about? Like, when did they talk about a peeling over the course of that movie? I didn't even remember that. So they didn't really sell it very well
Yeah.
to start with. Like, it's not memorable whenever they did talk about it earlier in the movie. But then it's like, I don't know, it's kind of a stretch, when you figure out what it is. It's like one guy just suddenly figures out what it is. It's like there's no thought process behind it, as you can see,
Yeah, and it's a little hard to believe that like nobody over all these years could have sort of figured this out or put the clues together. But like our young man is able to sort of piece it together, and we've got to play these bells because this monster is that's going to do the ticket. Uh, and I don't know, just the original is just more scary. It's more like I said, there's just more mystery. There's more sort of like, what does this alien want? What about this? And I also like the fact that the original, they have chosen to participate basically in this ritual. You know, they've had agency, where a monster movie doesn't have agency, obviously. It's just the monster like killing people. And so that makes Karen a more interesting character. It makes the other characters that they interview more interesting because they're like hiding this ritual that they participated in, the seance. And it's funny because this one actively tries to sort of bring religion into the story. And like I said, with the crosses and with some of the other things. And yet I think the other one, the original, sort of addresses religion in more interesting ways.
yeah,
So I don't know. It's a dream. But in the end, I kind of felt like this, like I said, I felt like this was fine. Like, if you wanted to watch a harmless horror movie with your family, you could watch this and it would be fine.
yeah,
It's not. It's very generic, and it'll not be remembered. And it's like what Jeremy John says is, "I'll forget this in T-1 day." I feel like that's true with this, but in a way, it does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity because I really think there was the potential to make this a great movie if you did it in, say, the style of, I don't know, I haven't even seen the Conjuring movies, but just from what I can tell, that sort of style, I think that there's potential in this story that it could have actually been a really great remake. And this is just basically on the same level as the original, except for it has better acting. But then it's basically, I would give it the same grade of the original as I'd give it like a 6, just barely, in my opinion, barely smile worthy.
yeah,
Like a C plus kind of a thing I'd give it, because I think it is, the acting is better than the story is weaker than the original. I don't know, what do you have closing thoughts about this one?
that's well. let me see. It's gonna be kind of closing thoughts mixed with something else, I guess. I guess it's
Yeah.
all closing thoughts, but I kind of feel like this almost has the opposite problem that the movie had. Like everything the movie did well,
Yeah.
this kind of messed up, and
Agreed.
everything that the movie messed up, this kind of did well in a way. It's
Yeah.
like especially with the acting and the story, like the acting was bad in the original, but at least the things that they said, like the lines they were given, actually sounded like they came from somebody, like something that somebody would actually say.
Right.
Whereas in the remake, they said their lines well, but they weren't really. I don't know. I've never really bought into a lot of what the parents and Ellie were doing.
Yeah.
Like the parents say, ask Jan, "Why are you scaring Ellie about 50 million times?"
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we should talk about that. These parents are the worst. Like there's like major harm happening to their daughters, and they're just like, "Why are you being so troublesome? Like, why are you being this way?"
And so that kind of distracted me in a way.
That's
And then,
true.
and then Ellie is she's kind of annoying during the first part of the special, how she's
Yeah,
constantly trying to get Jan in trouble. Like with everything that she
that's
says, it's
true.
always like taking a jab at her.
Well, and like I said, because she doesn't name the dog Narek, and she doesn't. I don't know. There's just like less sort of signs of this force, I guess, that's controlling her that you get in the original film. There's just sort of less randomness, and I don't know. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. She is sort of more annoying than in the original.
And then like even the three guys, oh not the three guys, the two guys and the lady who were there when she vanished,
Yeah.
even they seem more real than the original that they did in the remake. Like I could buy like somebody like if you saw something like that in real life, you probably wouldn't want to revisit it with everybody who asked about it. You'd probably try to keep it a secret. But then in the remake, they like tried to keep it a secret for like one scene or like half a scene, and then they're like
Yeah.
all willing to talk about it all of a
Well, and the one
sudden.
character goes from being a hermit to being like a real estate developer or whatever that they interviewed for like 5 seconds.
Oh, and by the way, Keller, one of the guys who's in the remake, one of those guys that was there when she vanished,
Yeah.
he is the boyfriend from the original.
Oh,
I
really?
found out, yeah,
Oh,
watching one of
interesting.
those panels. So
That's a cool Easter egg. I didn't know that.
yeah,
Yeah. That
but
is true. Like her parents are kind of the worst, and like they just don't create as much of a sense of mystery or like the original does.
yeah,
So I
so
agree. Uh,
like
yeah, maybe I
like
was
you
too
said, it
nice
kind
with a
of
6. I don't know. I was
yeah.
too nice.
I might give this one a six just because it. I don't know. I won't. I'll give it a 5. I guess the other one
Okay.
or 5.5. It's like it does some things better, but then it makes mistakes that the original didn't make.
Yeah.
So it's like it balances out in the end.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it like a 5.5. I think it's watchable, but I do think it's a bit of a missed opportunity. So, oh well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Go watch something Wicked This Way Comes instead if you want a
Yes,
really good Disney horror movie.
so much better than both of these versions of this film, or Stranger Things. Watch that; that's
Yeah.
better. But yeah, something wicked this way comes. I actually think is like a hidden masterpiece. And I know people throw that word around a lot, but I really do love it that much. I think it was amazing. And so yeah, it's an interesting thing. This weird, random little Disney movie that we talk about. Lifetime and Lifetime's really gone off the rails. I mean, they used to be like similar to Hallmark, and it is not at all anymore. Like I think the ads during this were worse than it was like, oh my gosh, like there's like a movie about the Flint Michigan water problem. There's a movie coming up about Elizabeth Smart, Robert Durst, and then what's the other one? I can't even remember anymore. It's like, oh my gosh.
It's funny. Lifetime movies, I feel like they had a reputation before as being like these really good, like very special episode kind of movies, and now they
Yeah.
kind of have this reputation of being like these really trashy true crime kind of
Yeah, or
things.
like the unauthorized true story of Full House or something. You're just like, boy, they are the bottom of the barrel. And I mean, in comparison to other Lifetime movies, this thing is like way better. Than like most of that nonsense that they're putting out.
Yeah, it was funny. I was watching another horror movie recently called The Stepfather, which has nothing to do with Watcher in the Woods in any way, almost. Just that I was watching them at the same time. And somebody said in the comments, because it was on YouTube, because that was the only way I could find it, unfortunately. It's
Uh-huh.
like, whoa, I've never seen this Lifetime movie before. Because it was about this father who wants a perfect family, and he goes from family to family, and when they don't satisfy him, he kills them and moves on to another one. And it was like and I was like, this really does feel like a Lifetime movie in that way. This is like the story wise, like the acting is better. It has Terry O'Quinn from Lost as like the stepfather,
Oh yeah.
so he was good. But still, like this really does feel like a typical Lifetime movie, and that's one good thing about the Watcher in the Woods remake is it's not. So
Yeah, this is, like I said, way better than most of the other Lifetime movies. And so at least they got that. So that's good. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of we're kind of met, I think, on both of these, to be honest, it sounds like. But
they're
if you're
worth
looking,
seeing
if
once.
there's not a ton of horror movies that are family, or I don't know, I never know whether something's a horror movie or thriller. I have no idea. But anyway, if you want to watch this kind of movie and you want to introduce your kids to the genre, you could do worse than either of these versions.
Yes.
That's kind of my thought about both of them. So
Or
yeah.
actually, and this is kind of more also off the rails, along with the Something Wicked mention. But there's also a really good movie that Disney made under the Touchstone label. I was just talking about with somebody called Arachnophobia, which is about poisonous spiders,
Oh,
which is
okay. I
also
didn't
a
know that
horror
was
movie that's
Disney.
really good for kids, and it's also a Disney movie, which also happens to be a little
Ooh.
bit scary.
I'll have to do that next year for a Disney Scares
Yeah.
Month. Next, so tomorrow we'll be having my review of Halloween Town for Disney Scares Month, and so you want to check into that. You'll enjoy that, I think. And so yeah, that's kind of our thoughts on Watchers in the Woods. Let us know in the comment section what you think of these films, and yeah, or maybe what are some more family-friendly horror movies that you'd like to watch with your family around Halloween. And so hope you have a very happy Halloween, and thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
And so where can people find you?
So I write for can't talk, rotoscopers.com. We're kind of doing a Halloween countdown that didn't really come together entirely, unfortunately. But we have some Halloween articles there that you can read. And I also write on my own blog called the vintagevestibule.wordpress.com.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks again. And you can find me at Spelling LDS Girl on all social media and Rachel's Reviews here on YouTube and on iTunes. You want to check that out, and please subscribe and like and have all that fun stuff. And my blog is 54 Disney Reviews. And like I said, I'll have a link down to all of that in the description section. So thanks so much. And we will talk to you all later.